Welcome back, everyone, and welcome back to one of our global plenary sessions. And today, this is one of the highlights, I believe, of World Energy Week Live, because it's when the World Energy Council launches its World Energy Trilemma 2021 edition. And I'm delighted that we'll have Dr. Angela Wilkinson here, who will be moderating our plenary session. And the discussion will be focused on balancing dimensions, navigating change agendas across geographies. So I'd like to hand over now to Angela, who will be taking you through for the next hour, our next global plenary session.
We feel proud to be recognized as an improver of the environmental sustainability indicator of the 2021 Energy Trilemma Index, which is the result of years of development, a low carbon electricity generation matrix, and improving the energy sector emissions. In Panama, we are committed to enhance circular economy in our energy transition agenda with 2030 vision. Non-conventional renewable energy, electromobility, distributed generation, energy efficiency, green hydrogen, and digitalization represents the hope that keeps our government enabling mechanisms and conditions to increase their participation while reducing our tons of CO2 accumulated in 2050. We invite you to create a tangible energy future and be able to enjoy it too. A green, sustainable, innovative, and climate balanced future shall be part of our generation. Don't wait for the future. Let's build the future together. Today, thank you very much.
These days, energy is a key factor in sustainable development. Kazakhstan's participation in the World Energy Trilemma is an important element in forecasting, adjusting, and monitoring the development of the nuclear industry. The trilemma is especially important in ensuring a balance between those three key factors. The issue of energy security requires urgent attention, while at the same time it is important to minimize the impact on the environment.
What the Nigerian government did recently was on the program aspect. It came with three very attractive programs. Number one, it came with what it calls Energizing Education Program that considered 37 federal government universities, mostly in the rural areas, and it provided them with electricity system, essentially of the renewable energy, solar photovoltaics, but with connectivity to the grid and diesel standby generators. The second one was on energizing markets, where the government took the largest markets and provided them again with mostly renewable electricity. And the third one is what the government called Solar Power Niger. And the aim was to provide mostly off-grid electricity to 5 million homes to take care of energy needs of about 25 million Nigerians.
Hello, everyone. Energy developments are essential to help us recover from crisis, repair our planet, and renew the well-being of societies. And in the last couple of days during World Energy Week Live, it's clear that energy fundamentals are back on the agenda as countries scramble to deal with a combination of security issues relating to access, price, and extreme weather. And societies everywhere are searching for new and better ways to progress and pay for global energy transition. The resilience of energy systems in the shift from fossil to renewable energy sources has also raised new questions about how to avoid future energy shocks, including a green inflation crisis. And throughout the last 2 days of World Energy Week Live, the role of policy has been stressed time and time again. So what does a good energy transition policy look like? And how is policy design evolving to keep pace with technology innovation and the connected challenges of global energy transition in an era of energy for people and planet, and prosperity and peace. Today, the World Energy Council has launched the 11th annual World Energy Trilemma Index report. We developed this index as a practical tool to support governments in tracking and balancing national policy performance. A sneak peek of this year's report shows on this screen the trilemma triangles for 6 different world regions. Now, each of these triangles shows the trilemma in terms of 3 main elements: energy security, equity and affordability, and environmental sustainability. And there's also an emphasis on the quality of governance rather than the natural endowment of resources. Now, I'm delighted today to be joined by 6 champions, users and producers of this remarkable policy tool. Let me briefly welcome each of them. We're joined today by Minister Shilunga, the Deputy Minister of Mines and Energy of Namibia, Minister Mirzagaliyev, the Minister of Energy in Kazakhstan, Jimmy Khoo, the CEO of SP Powergrid in Singapore, Yerlan Durmagambetov, the Managing Director of Strategy, Sustainable Development and Digital Innovation at Samruk-Kazyna, KK Venkata, Principal at Oliver Wyman, and Sir Philip Lowe, the Executive Chair of the World Energy Council's Energy Trilemma Index. Welcome to you all today. It's lovely to have you join us. Now, during the next hour or so, we're going to focus on a couple of broad questions relating to how are countries performing relating to the trilemma, how are companies helping governments and societies balance issues of security, equity, affordability and sustainability, and how is the trilemma going to evolve. And I hope and encourage you to send us your questions so that you can join the conversation. But let me turn to our first panellists and ask Minister Mirzagaliyev of Kazakhstan, how has your country been using, developing and performing in terms of a balanced energy transition and the energy trilemma challenges? Minister.
Thank you very much. Well, as I earlier said in my speech, we've made a very significant steps towards building the stable energy in the country that we have now. And now, of course, we have to switch to a more sustainable development. We have to follow the existing trends on climate change. And therefore, based on that, we are targeting on quite active involvement of renewable energy sources. For example, we started this program a few years ago with 0% of renewables, and now by the results of last year we achieved 3%. Now the target for us is to get to minimum of 15% by 2030. Of course, that puts additional stress on our existing energy balance in terms of its stability. Therefore, we have to follow the new modern technologies in terms of providing stable energy based on batteries, potentially in the future hydrogen, and of course natural gas. But you know, when I personally analyze on how Kazakhstan will reach for example, the carbon neutrality by 2060, I always compare that with 1980. And 40 years ago, we could not assume that Kazakhstan, or any of us, that we will be using iPhones, that we will be talking to you online, seeing each other on the camera. So it means that technologies are very rapidly developing, very fast growth. So our decision is to, first of all, to make the Paris Climate Agreement, our obligations to be fulfilled by 2030, and then we will have another 30 years on new technological transfer, which will bring us, because of the cheaper technologies that will be available by that time in terms of carbon capturing and storing. I also probably want to say a few words on, based on Trilemma, on energy security. And this is also a very big challenge for us now, because we also see in the just within a year that we became number 3 country in the world in terms of mining Bitcoins. And that puts additional stress on us. And therefore, we have to be working in advance in terms of making our energy safe and secured. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Of course, Kazakhstan ranks 40 on this year's World Energy Trilemma Index, having moved up 2 places since last year. So it's fantastic to see how, as you are developing your economy and taking forward your energy transition, you are progressing a way of finding that balance between these different elements. Now, Minister Shilunga, what's the story around your country's performance in balancing energy transition?
Thank you very much. Namibia has moved up the trilemma, and our aim continue to be energy security in the country. Our energy sector is dominated by liquid fuel that goes for 55% of our requirement. 23% is electricity and 19% of biomass. The rest is LPG and coal. Up to now, we do not have proven exploitable hydrocarbons in Namibia. We import all our petroleum products, and to take care of that, we have also invested in an oil storage facility to make sure that we increase the days of consumption in care of the, in case of supply disruption. When it comes to electricity, a number of reforms and changes have taken place over the years. We promulgated policies, important policies, such as the energy policy, the renewable energy policy. We have also come up with the independent power producers framework that guides the independent power producers when they are bringing about their transactions on board. And we also have got the modified single buyer model that has opened up the power sector to make sure that the independent power producers transact directly with end consumers and off-takers, that which can be mines and some other companies and also individuals. So those are some of the policies that we have brought about. And we also have got a plan that we brought about called the Harambee Prosperity Plan. And under that plan that result in the office of the president, we have come up with, we would like to come up with a hydrogen, green hydrogen, which has made Namibia very attractive, especially now when there was a discussion at the UN General Assembly. We had so many countries that wants to transact with us with regard to the green hydrogen. When it comes to the trilemma, the trilemma is very important to us as Namibia. We believe it is a guiding principle for us to be able to balance between the energy security, environmental sustainability, and energy equity, even though it is not very easy for us to be able to do that. And we might also have seen that we have ranked the weakest which is 42.6% with the energy security. And this is basically due to that we do not have sufficient diversity and that we do not have storage, and also because our imports are still very high, which is very much unsustainable. And when it comes to the access, we have improved from 47% in 2019 to 50% in 2021. When it comes to energy equity, which is the second lowest, it is because we have low electrification and the access, and our tariffs are also considered high relative to other countries in the region. Otherwise, we also we have improved and we are doing well when it comes to the diesel and petrol pricing. On the environmental sustainability, we have set our target and that we want to become 70% renewable energy penetration and zero emission by the year 2050. So we aim to reduce the greenhouse gases emission by 91% by 2030. And our ranking in this case, or our percentage, is 78 over 100 when it comes to environmental sustainability, which is actually good. And we are the top 10 performer in the 2019 ranking. This is very good, but it's also showing imbalance because the trilemma calls for a balance between the three dimensions, which we are unable to reach as of now because I would say we are a bit skewed. We are doing good when it comes to environmental sustainability, but when comparing now to the other dimension of energy security and equity, there is some sort of imbalance. So we still rely on the trilemma as a good and a very important guiding principle for us to be able to bring about balance when it comes to energy requirement in Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Shilunga, for that very honest and full account of how Namibia has been performing and improving its performance against the different elements of the energy trilemma. And also, again, to Minister Mirzagaliyev for being open around the challenges in Kazakhstan of achieving energy transition whilst the economy is changing so quickly with the opportunities of digitisation and number 3 in Bitcoin. That was news to me. There you go. Let me turn to Sir Philip Lowe and ask the question. We've just heard two stories from Kazakhstan and Namibia, two countries with very different energy systems and situations, but both using the Energy Trilemma Index to try and balance and integrate their policies. Why is it important that governments do this? And can you give us an example of the types of trade-offs governments have to manage in addressing global energy transition?
Well, thank you, Angela, and welcome to everyone to this launching session for the Trilemma report. The ministers have rightly emphasized the tensions in finding a balance between the three elements of the trilemma. Of course, the balance which can be achieved depends very much on the specific situation of a country, its resources, its capacity to invest, and the way in which its demand for energy has developed. And secondly, you have to look at it over time and see to what extent it is possible to have a transition by 2050 or by 2060 to achieve a balance which you don't necessarily have now. Now, if you look at many countries in Africa, demand for wider accessibility of energy to populations is absolutely essential. And if they're going to develop a competitive economy, they need affordable energy for business as well. Now, in the short term, this can only be achieved in terms of accessibility. These accessibility objectives can only be achieved through imports, or in some cases, of hydrocarbon. But obviously, as the Minister from Namibia has suggested, and is part of their strategy, increasing the proportion of renewables, same is true in Kazakhstan, it will be essential to achieve net zero objectives in the longer term. Of course, achieving those objectives means investing, and part and parcel of the challenge in Africa and some countries in Asia and Latin America is to be able to afford the massive investments in the future of renewable energy, while at the same time widening accessibility. That's the first tension. And it's a clear case of where the trilemma is a good framework to start a dialogue about what the solutions will be. More close to those developed countries who have chosen to develop energy strategies with a change in their energy mix. The move away from coal in order to reduce CO2 emissions and also air pollution may, of course, cause a reliance on other sources of hydrocarbons, for example, gas. And while the investments in renewables are progressing, there is a need for gas in particular as a transition fuel, and perhaps also in certain cases to deal with intermittency. And that places a reliance on the countries concerned on international markets for gas, which have developed due to the parallel development of gas delivered by pipeline and LNG. Now, one notices already in the world today how the prices of that gas have risen considerably as Asian economies have recovered rapidly, have turned to gas, whether it's in China or India or in Japan and elsewhere. And this has placed, for example, a challenge for those countries in Europe and elsewhere who've relied on gas as a potential source of energy for transition. The move away from nuclear in Belgium and France has created the same tension. How do we get to lower reliance on nuclear, or indeed in certain countries like the UK, more nuclear, while we move away from coal? And that again produces a problem and a tension which needs to be addressed. There are many other examples, Angela, of where other tensions, other conflicts appear. Perhaps for many countries and corporations, there's a little bit too much optimism about how you can offset some emissions which you cannot reduce before 2050 through CCUS or forestry. And if you invest in CCS, you've got to think about how you're going to store the CO2 later. And that comes back to the issue of environmental sustainability. Another more practical example is the degree to which we want to encourage transport mobility and electric vehicles. But if the electric vehicles are driven by reliance on hydrocarbons, there is an innate contradiction there which needs to be addressed. So these are some of the examples of where the trilemma tool of analysis is confronting both governments and companies with the need to find solutions which necessarily cannot be done overnight, but need a strategy to for them to arrive at net zero. And we'll come back to the issue of what that means in terms of economic development. I think, and also in terms of the relationship between the public sector and the private sector. Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, wrote the other day that he couldn't envisage that Microsoft could meet its overall net zero objectives unless there was clear partnering, public-private and private-private, to achieve a result. The port of Rotterdam in Europe has reached agreement with the local provinces in order to plan together how they can reduce the CO2 emissions from the port. So that's my first remarks.
Thank you. That's a fascinating glimpse into the challenges of balancing and juggling many different elements as we progress energy transitions at the national level and also at the global level. So let me pick up from where Philip left us in terms of how he talked about not just governments but cities and also companies. Let me turn to Jimmy. Jimmy, how does a company help support government and achieve a balanced energy transition and manage these different dimensions of security and economic development at the same time as equity and affordability and the environmental sustainability aspects of energy transition?
First, thank you, Angela, for inviting me to participate in this panel discussion. Honored to be amongst such distinguished participants. Maybe I will just make respond to that question at two levels. First, Singapore as a country, right? Really, we are a small little state in Southeast Asia. Therefore, I mean, for those who are not less aware, east to west about 42 kilometers, north south 15 kilometers. So it's a very tiny country, and therefore comes with advantages and disadvantages, challenges and opportunities, right? So on the energy front, of course, we are in energy importing country, right? Therefore, we have to find solutions to the trilemma when it comes to energy, right? So very early on, Singapore as a country has really moved on and decided among the fossil fuels, natural gas is one solution in terms of mitigating carbon emissions. So we are completely, largely, our energy is largely on natural gas. So this is the energy imports, and then and being a small country, the advantage is accessibility is much easier to achieve in terms of the three nodes of the triangle of the trilemma. So to Singaporeans, accessibility to power is not an issue. In fact, the last recent years we have opened up the market to every home has the ability to buy from any retailer out there. So there is a full market competition. That's for accessibility. But coming to energy, the sustainability, like I say, natural gas already is the starting point, but clearly with climate change, Singapore as a country is pushing very hard in order to progress on this front, right? So recently, just last year, the government launched a Green Plan 2030 with a lot of focus on trying to move forward as far as sustainability solutions. And the approach is a whole of government approach. So looking at all aspects in order to achieve the sustainability goals, right? So, and then in the plan, it covers many areas. For example, on the greening, right? So the target is to plant 1 million trees, 1 million more trees. And if those who have come to Singapore already, you know that we are fairly green city and green country, preserving, although small and lack of space, greenery is a key part. So that bit is about the environment, but less directly, but that's to illustrate there's a whole of government. In this green plan, we as a country, we are what we call the renewable energy disadvantage. Even though we are right above the equator, we have the sun. There is not enough space to put solar panels. So disadvantage, but even then there is a very ambitious target to move to quadruple the solar energy from today's level by 2025, by 2025 quadruple. By 2030, we are targeting 2 gigawatt peak. And the system peak is about 7 gigawatts. So it's actually a significant part of the composition as far as trying to do renewable energy. There are other solutions that the government is looking at. One of them is, of course, importing green energy, right? And this is collaboration with various countries, and that is work in progress. Hoping that can also do. We are hoping that would help us in terms of sustainability agenda. So all around, all kinds of initiatives. Now, as a company, I will speak on behalf of Singapore Power, which is a power grid company. What are we doing? First, as a grid company, we are a key enabler of all the energy solutions or the sustainability solutions. For example, the target for Singapore is to electrify all vehicles by 2040. So, and again, as a small country, we're able to do so fairly quickly, right? It is feasible to roll out charging infrastructure. A typical traveling distance is only 50 kilometers. So therefore, the challenges for drivers is not going to be as significant as, say, a country with a lot of land mass. So as a small country, electrification, the grid itself then will have to support charging infrastructure across the whole country. That's in progress. There are many initiatives, but I'll just mention a few. Another thing that's important, solar panels, for example, when we want to introduce a 2 gigawatt peak, as a small country, we are probably able to manage the intermittency much better because it's a small country. So we're looking at working with government with energy storage. Yeah. And finally, on the demand side, I just want to say a few words on this one. Now, Singapore, being in the tropics, is a big user of air conditioning. Now, in Singapore, our assessment is that air conditioning takes up probably 40% of energy usage in Singapore. Now, so we are looking at how to improve the efficiency in terms of energy, in terms of air conditioning and lowering the carbon emissions from energy, right, from air conditioning. District cooling, centralizing cooling systems, we have seen 40% efficiency in the group. We have a very large district cooling system in the Marina Bay for colleagues who have been to Singapore. Now we're pushing that to residential cooling. We are doing centralized cooling for public housing, 200 blocks. That's work in progress. We are going into all buildings and looking at whether we can actually connect chiller systems together to be able to have a virtual centralized system and therefore achieve the kind of energy efficiency. Because like I say, in Singapore, cooling is a big use of energy. So all fronts.
Thank you.
As a company, we're doing at all fronts. So just to make some comments about the country as well as what Singapore Power is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. That's a great example of how balance depends on situation. A small country, huge solar potential and tropical conditions requiring more cooling. I'd like now to go to, of course, a very different situation and turn to Yerlan and ask him, you know, Kazakhstan is moving ahead with a very ambitious decarbonisation strategy. It's working on lots of fronts on regional cooperation to make a sustainable energy society in Central Asia work. What are you doing as a company to help balance these connected challenges of energy transition around security, equity and affordability and environmental sustainability?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Angela and fellow panelists. While preparing for this meeting, I just made a very interesting revelation to myself that since I'm professionally more an IT person or digital person, I've come originally from a binary world, from a dynamic world. It's just 1 to 0 or either or in decision making, it's my way or a highway, or, you know, it's just in philosophical terms, to be or not to be. And all of a sudden we face the world where it's just much more complicated. We have a trilemma index here, speaking of energy security, affordability, and environmental sustainability. And Dr. Angela, I just wanted to say I'm not just representing a company, I'm representing a national fund running different kind of state-owned assets. We have companies dealing in power generation, transmission, and distribution. We have air companies. We have telecommunication companies, and so on. And the current challenges we face in terms of trilemma indexes, I sort of represented as a tripod model with 3 legs. And speaking of energy security, definitely the first and the most important objectives for us at the moment is the regeneration of state-owned infrastructure, and not just state-owned. We're talking about renovation of power stations, because most of the power stations are originally coming from the Soviet time, and they're very aged. And while renovating them, we're sort of trying to make them more green, more sustainable, if you like, using new technologies, to substitute the black and coal generation. That's in terms of energy security. In terms of the energy quality and affordability, His Excellency Minister Mirzagaliyev has just mentioned that, the state policy towards the energy market and energy balance. And speaking of our tariffs and availability of energy to the population and to the local producers, I think the situation is quite okay. Of course, there is room for improvement, but speaking of affordability, this lack of tripod model of trilemma indexes, I would say it's quite okay. I think, speaking of national funds, sovereign national funds from Samruk-Kazyna, we're talking about a third leg, and we're talking about the environmental sustainability. And since I mentioned that National Wealth Fund runs different kind of assets, for us it's very important to apply a unified approach to sustainable development, further sustainable development. Speaking in concrete terms, I would say that we have initialized a green energy transition plans for each company within the fund. Basically, we're teaching our companies, most of them are still running on leg 1 and leg 2. They're talking about energy security, maybe affordability, but we are sort of in the stage of implementing carbon accounting, and we are just teaching company and trying to ask companies so that they know their scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 methodology, how to run their own, how to know their carbon accounting, and so that they are aware of carbon footprint and the measures how to make them more green. Shortly speaking, I mentioned that I'm originally coming from the binary world, but in the current times, we need to see more shades, in the spectrum from transition from, well, it's not exactly a physical spectrum, but spectrum of transition from black to green. We see many shades, like transiting to more brown energy and more brown energy production and generation and transmission. And definitely, speaking of new assets or speaking of B2C companies, here we're talking about really implementing a green approach. Basically, in concrete terms, for each company in the National Fund, we are implementing a sort of unified approach for the green energy transition.
Thank you.
Dr. Angela?
Thank you. I really like your reflection that you're moving from a binary either or into an and approach. I think that's the essence of the energy trilemma and the challenges of achieving balance. So thank you for that. Let me go to KK and ask, we've heard these glimpses of energy policy performance and balance from different parts of the world and from different perspectives of companies and governments. And Sir Philip has illuminated the challenges of managing different types of trade-offs. What's standout in this year's Energy Trilemma Index report, KK?
Thank you so much, Angela. I think Oliver Wyman is really pleased to see the progress in the trilemma performance over the last 10 years, where we have been co-developing this with the World Energy Council. As we look into this year's report, there are a few things which were expected and are pretty much the same. For example, if you look at the top countries in performance, the Sweden, the Switzerlands, the Denmarks, they perform well on all indices and they are on the top of their game. They have really universal access to energy, clean cooking, and they do really well overall, right? But what is really interesting is when you look at the list of improvers in it. Now, if within that list that you see in this year's report, you see 5 Asian countries, you see 3 from Latin America, and a couple from Africa. Now, all of these countries have pretty low levels of access, but they have made significant improvement in their Trilemma scores overall. Right now, there's learnings to be taken from all of this. Right now, the most interesting one is what has China really done in here, right? With the large amount of penetration that you're seeing from the renewable energy side in a country as large as China, you are seeing a significant amount of growth in the scores of it, and it ranks 10 with respect to the biggest improver since 2000, if you look at it. Now you're seeing similar trends happening in India as well. So there is learnings to be taken from these large ones, but also you would want to acknowledge that the journey is not yet done. Each of these really large economies have a significant amount of carbon footprint, even as of today, and they continue to use and they rely on coal, even though they have a high levels of renewable penetration, or they're getting to high levels of renewable penetration. And therefore the transition, while for most of these countries and for most of the companies we work with, the end goal is clear and everybody knows how to get there. The path of how to, everybody knows where to get, but the path of how to get there is a really interesting question. And how do you really make that path sustainable at every point in time is a really interesting question, which does come up with at some form or shape as you look through the report in here. There are other interesting learnings that we do see from, we look at the report. So for example, the value of integration as a huge driver in here is an important one, but it is possible in some geographies, not possible in some. Like for example, I think in Southeast Asia, pretty difficult to get interconnectedness. Countries are trying, but it's a bit of a challenge to do that, right? So there's learnings to be done there. I think in reality, what we see is you would need to start generating this broad-based dialogue between industry, the investor community, the regulators, and the financing ecosystem, which has now come front and center into this debate, and the general public to find a solution that could work.
Thank you, KK. We have some questions coming in from Emily Calvert in New Zealand and Heidi in Chile, and I'm going to sort of combine them with the moderator's license and throw them round for a quick set of responses, if I could invite that. We've got 15 minutes to go, and I'd like to leave time for closing remarks. I want to pick up on what KK just said about the challenges of integration, and that means not just integration of different parts of the system, but also cooperation and integration across borders. And I'd like to ask, how does the trilemma balance get enabled by regional cooperation? How does the Energy Trilemma Index and the challenges of balancing policy and energy transition, how can it be better facilitated through regional cooperation and coordination, and also by cooperation and coordination between companies within and beyond the energy sector? Philip, let me ask you to start with that.
Right. Just a short remark on what the previous speaker said. One tension I haven't mentioned, which is extremely important in all our economies now, is that digitalization is actually helping us use energy better. But data centers now are as important as aviation in CO2 emissions. And I just mentioned that now too. So this is one of the challenges. On the issue of regional cooperation, well, you've got to look at it from the supply side and the demand side. There are advantages on both sides. First of all, if you combine the markets of neighboring countries, after all, energy doesn't travel that well. We're doing better at that through LNG and also major transmission lines, but it doesn't travel well. So doing things with your neighbors is a good thing. It produces more diversity of supply. It makes your system more resilient to shocks if you have solidarity in the running of the market, which is integrated together, providing you're all willing to accept common rules to letting the market work. Secondly, it's producing, if you integrate and interconnect networks, there's greater resilience. over large geographies, taking advantage in particular of different meteorological conditions. We heard about Singapore's cooling challenge. If you have cooperation over a large geography, then you have the possibility of better balancing of supply and demand according to different meteorological patterns, and also according to different demand patterns, because cultures are different on this. So there are some very good examples. Frankly, the interconnection achievements made between Western and Eastern Europe have had significant advantages for the Baltic countries and for the previous countries which were in pre-89 on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and now they have interconnection between them. The prices across Western and Eastern Europe have leveled out, and we've got a situation where there is a common understanding that through interconnection, through integration of markets, we can get good results in terms of checking prices, in terms of resilience, and in terms of diversity of supply. This is not the only example. In Latin America, there are similar efforts, and in Asia too, the cooperation where it's possible politically is going to be part and parcel of meeting the energy challenge. The public partnerships which were needed to meet the energy challenge will have to cross borders in order to achieve their results.
Thank you, Philip. Let me ask Minister Shilunga. You talked also about the green hydrogen interest for Namibia. How does that also, in terms of the balancing of transition, how will green hydrogen require regional cooperation and integration in Namibia?
Regional integration is very important to all of us, not only in the region, but also beyond. And with the green hydrogen that we, as Namibia, wants to embark upon, we are looking more into exports. The demand, the local demand, it might be little, but the international demand is very high. And that is why I'm saying we have been we have become very attractive to others because of this project that we would want to bring on board. Ensuring energy security by balancing the trilemma is also going to be enhanced with the introduction of the green hydrogen. Green hydrogen, we are looking at it in totality, from the production to the transformation when we convert, to transport, and to the end use. And at all those levels, you have some spin-offs that are coming out. Jobs are being created. Energy at all levels is being enhanced, be it at the production site, at the transmission site, the distribution. At all levels, it is being enhanced by this introduction of the green hydrogen. And when it comes now to the balance, obviously it will contribute, because when we have it, then access is enhanced, security, of course, and also environmental sustainability, because it is that of a green green energy.
Thank you. So transition itself is bringing a social and economic transformation, which also changes how you can achieve balance in your energy trilemma at national and regional level. I have a question in from George Reynoso. We've got 3 minutes to answer this question. How can countries balance the trilemma with these big increases in the price of energy? How can countries balance trilemma with the big increases in the price of energy, which of course is affecting the security, the affordability and the equity aspect of the Energy Trilemma Index? Who would like to lead me off? Anyone? Singapore Power? Jimmy? Yerlan? Is price? How do you manage rebalance your trilemma when price changes so significantly? Jimmy, your sound's off.
Okay, there you go. I'll just make a step, but of course, it's a trilemma. Natural conflicts will always be there. The question is how to do it at the lowest possible cost, right? Finding solutions which can enable all the three nodes at the lowest possible cost. For example, some of our thoughts are, if we can share infrastructure, or you centralize the controls so that there is less duplication. Say if you are looking at energy storage as a solution to intermittency, how do we manage and co-use infrastructure like this to deal with intermittency rather than many solutions at the local level? So it is inevitable that there is a price pressure, because actually it is the lowest cost today is of course the polluting fossil fuels, but that is because there is no economic pricing today and the social impact is not priced in, right? So if we are looking for solutions, how do we do so with the ability to introduce the sustainability dimension and then manage cost? That's my perspective of the situation.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes left of this session. I wish we had more time for conversation, but I want to ask give everybody an opportunity at some closing comments. We've heard some great things about it's about the and rather than the either or in managing energy transitions. We've heard about how the regional balance can contribute to diversity, resilience, and requires common rules. We've heard about how transition itself brings economic and social transformation, which also requires us to think about balance. But I always think of the Energy Trilemma Index as a three-handed clap. We're learning to clap with three hands, and we're doing that at a global level, at a national level, at the regional level, and surely also we're learning at the city and individual level. So I would like to ask our esteemed panelists today, as you make your closing remarks, would it be advantageous to extend the Energy Trilemma Index from global and regional to city, company and individual level? And if so, where would you start first? If I could ask the Minister to lead us off, please. Minister Shilunga, your closing remarks, and where would you take the Energy Trilemma Index next?
Thank you very much. The index continues to be our tool to compare ourselves with others. It will continue to be an index that gives us the information about how best countries are performing and what do they do to balance their energy system, and what are those policies that we have in place and how are they being implemented. the trilemma is also a great indicator for us to assess our efforts, because against the trilemma, we will be able now to know where we are and where other countries are. And at the end of the day, still enhance or create a platform for us to dialogue and exchange valid and valuable information that will be able to guide us on our way forward as country, as continents, and as the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir Philip?
Well, listening to the conversations about the difficulties of dealing with energy prices underlines the fact that there's obviously a social dimension to everything to do with this energy transition. It's a transition across the economy, across society. And if there are high energy prices today, it's because of already the fact that the transition is in progress, and that there's been some diversion of demand from higher polluting CO2 hydrocarbons to lower ones like gas. I think that as far as the level of the trilemma is concerned, its logic applies to every single net zero strategy which has been adopted so far and will be adopted, whether it's by countries. There are already 124, I think, who at COP26 have actually said that they have a net zero strategy to achieve that by 2050 or 2060. There are 1,500 or more companies who've actually produced reports, sometimes asked for by their investors, to which say that they have a net zero strategy, and cities and local communities also have the same objectives. Now, as was emphasized by one of our previous speakers, is yes, it's already good to have an objective, but how do you get there? In my own consulting firm, Auxeria, we spent a day discussing that issue of working out effective and implementing effective strategies. It is a challenge.
Thank you, Philip. So countries, companies, cities and communities could all do with an energy trilemma framework, is what I'm hearing. We have a minute left. I'm going to go to Jimmy, Yerlan and KK. The same question to you. Should we be extending the trilemma, given that we are seeing energy transition and the need for balance extending beyond national level and regional level to cities, companies and individuals? And where would you start? A quick, Jimmy.
Just a quick one. I think the trilemma can the ability to clap with all three hands is feasible if you collaborate at a larger scale. So, for example, imports is clearly a good example where you're solving the problem beyond the boundaries of the country. So Singapore is a small country, getting out of the region, we can then have access to possibly green energy. So collaboration between countries is an example of how we can break the limitations of the geographical limits, right? The second big thing that I think that can help the trilemma in order to clap three hands again is innovation, right? How do you find solutions in order to be able to do more? For example, in Singapore, no space, but so we started to put solar panels on water, right? So this is one example, innovation. But overall collaboration, cities, governments, people, I think all fronts, in order to achieve the ability to realize the trilemma and achieve the outcome, all fronts, more collaboration at all levels. That's how my perspective is. Yep.
Sorry, we're over time and I'm being screamed at. So Yerlan and KK. Yerlan, cities, companies or individuals, which would you punt for next?
I would actually extend your trilemma framework to individual levels, because one of the major challenges I face while working is a mindset of people like not really liking going green. And when we are originally coming from a collectivistic nature of our society, and once you're measured or assessed on an individual level, you sort of start changing your mindset. So the short answer is yes, I would extend your trilemma framework on the individual level, not to mention the regional, city, and so on.
Thank you very much. And KK, Oliver Wyman, a fantastic partner of the World Energy Council in progressing the trilemma. What do you think about the future evolution in terms of cities, companies and individuals?
I completely agree with what's been said. I think it makes sense to extend this all the way through and use it both as a tool, not just for policy making, but also as a tool for behavioral change that we would want to see in the individuals in society.
Thank you. So thank you very much to all our panellists today for a fantastic expose, a tour of the world of the Energy Trilemma Index and how countries and companies are working to balance the multiple elements involved in a successful energy transition. I'm going to end the section and I look forward to evolving the trilemma with the support of all our members and our partners. Thank you.
Angela, a great session. I've been in the industry way too long, and I have to say that the trilemma is one of the thought pieces that I think the industry uses and beyond industry to get a sense of where we are on our journey. And since we started the journey to net zero many, many years ago, recognizing that there are, as you call it, this three-handed clap that is needed to enable us to get there and the challenges of that. And I think in the debate that we've just heard, or the discussion that we've heard, we can see how useful governments find that, policymakers find that, and also elements of organizations as well. So from that point of view, how do you think the discussion around the trilemma has changed over the last 4 or 5 years? Have you noticed a difference in the way people are interpreting the results and how they debate and discuss that?
Well, we did a lot of work to make it a real index so that countries could actually look at how their performance had been progressing over time. And I think that changed a lot of the conversation, because it wasn't just a snapshot for this year. It was, how do we compare it with previous year's performance? And I think that made a big change to how governments could use the trilemma. And then when I listen to the conversations, of course, we hear a lot more about the social, the equity and the affordability dimensions, and how do those relate to the new social justice agenda that's coming around. Right. And the third area I hear is what we ended on, is it's fine to have balance at the national level, but you have to have balance at all these different levels. So how do we evolve the trilemma, recognizing that it's based on real object metrics outside? How do we get the data to transform it into something that can be used as on your app, your phone app, for you as an individual, or on a city level, or on a regional level? But surely that is the humanising energy agenda, isn't it? It is the humanising energy agenda. So from your perspective, taking it down to that level is a natural next step? Absolutely, and a very challenging one, because we benchmark a certain number of metrics to make it globally comparable. When you get further down the levels, when you go to cities, the diversity blossoms. When you go further down to communities, the diversity of what's involved. And how do you pick a manageable set of metrics to make that assessment applicable easy to you as the individual, and also comparable with other people? Right. And I think that one of the other aspects I was interested in, I think it was from Kazakhstan, was one of the panelists talking about how they use it in the context, if I can call it, energy literacy. I mean, he was talking about, educating organizations about emission control, the different levels of those emissions, how they're different. So would this be part of that? I know that's very much part of the Council's mission, is to encourage, a recognition that energy literacy is an issue and it perhaps delays transition. So would that be very much part of the next stage, like taking it to the individual, using it as part of that? Yeah, I think the Energy Trilemma Index encourages people to start exploring how energy is in their everyday life, and also what it means in terms of what does security mean to an individual. You don't want the lights to go off suddenly, right? You want to know how you're going to have reliable supply. You also have to think about how price is going to change and what you're going to be able to afford. And you have to think about, there's a lot of people who just don't, they want to know what is the carbon content of my energy, but they also want to think about what's air quality, what does this supply of renewables mean in terms of vulnerable communities otherwise in other countries. So the individual, at an individual level, there are people who are interested in net zero, which resolves other problems around inequality and security at the same time as the environmental performance of their energy system.
Yes, and I think also the trilemma highlights the issue. Security could be an issue, as in, you know, am I accessing energy? But there are other trade-offs that I now need to be aware of as an individual. And that is a backdrop that dominates debate and discussion, I think, in energy just about anywhere in the world now. So this is the moment, potentially, to take it to that level.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it does take us out of an old mindset of either or.
Yeah.
The old economist on the one hand, on the other hand, or it's this versus this, and it encourages us to ask and to think about the new solutions that make you go and that, for me, is the difference between a transition in the old sense and a transformation in the way people are talking about the global energy transition challenge. It's really about the transformation of societies and economies, not just the decarbonisation of the energy system.
Well, I think that's an excellent point for us to end our session, because I couldn't agree more in terms of the broadening of that agenda and the and that we have around that. So Angela, and also to the panelists, thank you very much indeed for launching the index for this year. Obviously some insights to that, but also the ambitions of where the Council wants to take this over the course of the next number of years and bring that down to the level of the individual and all the issues associated with that we've just talked about.